Okay, guys, so we got complete and utter chaos inside the Democrat Party. This is something I honestly did not expect to happen. In fact, I lost money on it. I've mentioned that before. In the betting markets, I assumed that Joe Biden would stay in no matter what because he's so arrogant that he wouldn't be able to actually drop out. I mean, you have to be arrogant to be president. It would be a lie to say that President Trump isn't arrogant. So, I mean, I'm just surprised that he was actually willing to give up power like that. But I guess it kind of makes sense in a sense. There are a lot of problems for the Democrat Party right now, though. For one thing, their top candidate now has to be Kamala Harris, who is not very well liked. She's very progressive. She hasn't done anything during this administration to show that she is presidential. And she is just completely incapable, as far as I'm concerned, to take over for the presidency. Now, for her, the reason it has to be her is because she is the first black vice president, the first female vice president at the same time. I put that in quotation marks because she's not really black. And I'm not saying this as like a purity test or anything like this. This is what a lot of African Americans say online. There are a lot of like black influencers who do not consider her black because when she ran and won the Senate in California, she was considered the first Indian, as in from India, the first Indian senator. Her father is from India, or I think her mother's from India actually, and her father is from Jamaica? Crap, actually, I knew it at one point. Anyways, she's an Atlantic Islander, not a Pacific Islander, excuse me. And, yeah, a lot of them were black because in those territories, there were a lot of black slaves, and a lot of people who were already living on the island died from disease unintentionally. Because, I mean, the people who colonized those areas wanted to have people who would actually do the labor, people who already knew the land and could treat the land, and that they could teach, or maybe enslave in a lot of cases, to use them for like plantations. A lot of them did die of disease, but a lot of them did inbreed with people who came in and colonized, or people who were brought in as slaves. And even if they themselves died of disease, their offspring would be from a racial line that already had contact with that disease. So the kid would very likely survive while the parent would die of disease. So she is like basically a quarter black is what that boils down to. And I mean, she didn't act anything like you would expect like a stereotypical African American to act like, because she's not into like hip hop or like rap or anything like that. And you think that wouldn't matter for politics, but it actually really does. Because for a lot of people in the black community, they do still believe in like the one drop rule and frickin' the purity test. And it's insane to me that there are still people that racist. Whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, but there are a lot of very racist people in the black community who look at Kamala Harris and just say, hell no. And a lot of people are trying to get behind her, like Joe Biden got behind her. But the Obamas didn't. I think the Clintons might have gone behind her after they had already gone behind Biden. And no one else has really gotten behind her. There are a few like no-names, small-timers. I think Schumer maybe. But I mean, who really cares about Schumer? He's an old white dude, so people who already don't like old white dudes are not going to want to listen to the old white dude. I mean, for the case of voting for Kamala Harris, maybe they would listen to Schumer. But Schumer is not, he's not as popular as like people would think. The dude Very interesting guy. I have seen him vote against his entire party's interest in Senate votes before. Like, he joined with Republicans to, like, strike down a bill that the rest of the Democrat Party in the Senate wanted. And this was him as majority leader, which means his entire party basically disagreed with him, and he was allowed to stay on as majority leader. I don't know why that's a thing, but I mean, there are times where someone in the Senate and House, and this is a little bit off to a side, there are times in the Senate and House where someone will vote against a bill and take all the flack for it because they know that they're going to win their election anyways. And basically, like, the speaker talked to them in private and basically said, hey, vote against this. It's not going to hurt you. They're going to forget about it in a year anyways. Don't worry about it. We just need to strike this down for now. And this happened before. Can't remember what it was. They wanted to strike down a bill. It was a few months ago. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But they wanted to strike it down and then bring it back up when Steve Scalise got back because he was, like, sick or just had a surgery or something. And in order to do that, they would need somebody to vote against it, because when you vote against it, then you can come back later and say, hey, I voted against that. I actually want it now. So can we have that vote again? And then it'll go back to the floor and then go back for another vote. You have to have someone who wants to change their mind that could, who's, if their mind was changed, could, get the bill to go through. Anyways, I think basically that's what Johnson's been doing a lot, is that he's basically going against what a lot of the party want, even though he knows it'll make him unpopular, because he knows that it'll hurt the Republicans in the long run, or he just doesn't have the votes, and he'd rather, like, pretend that it's just not a popular enough thing in the Republican Party to be concerned about, or that they might be able to go back to it later if they can convince people that, hey, we actually really do need this, we need to revisit it. And it's also just going to be really bad for the Democrats right now, because even if they get behind Kamala Harris, they have ignored the will of 14 million voters. Now, I don't think that's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be, because for probably 11 to 12 million of them, they're not going to be that upset about it because they already voted for Kamala Harris as part of the Biden-Harris ticket. So they were already expecting that she might take over, and if they were honest to themselves and they already thought Biden was deranged, demented, not saying that in a disparaging term, but the fact that Joe Biden has dementia. Being demented literally means you have dementia. It's usually used in a different way than that nowadays, but that's the actual definition, is that yes, Joe Biden is demented. But like for 11 to 12 million of those people, they already may have known, like they weren't lying to themselves, or they were already expecting that Joe Biden wouldn't be able to make it through 4 years. Because remember, there was an article that came out in 2020 that basically said, all you have to do, Joe Biden, is to survive. We just need your corporeal presence in order to beat Donald Trump. They knew that Biden was screwed up in 2020. They knew that he was sick, that his mind wasn't there anymore. And, I mean, it's kind of a miracle that Joe Biden is still as cogent as he is. And he's not very well there anymore. But like after 4 years with what was going on with Joe at the time, it's kind of a minor miracle that he's still able to even speak or walk at all. By this point, the dementia would usually have taken over completely. And I'm just like kind of annoyed by it because they rigged the 2016 primaries they came out against Bernie Sanders and had super delegates vote for Hillary Clinton, which rigged the primaries against Bernie. And it's not like I wanted Bernie to win anyways. A lot of the Bernie bros actually helped Trump over the finish line because they were so disenfranchised by the Democrat Party that they switched sides and voted for Trump out of spite. And some of them actually stuck around. We actually still have Bernie bros in the MAGA movement right now who probably, most of them have probably given up their socialistic tendencies from it. There's not a lot of them that still believe in like the kind of Bernie policies anymore, especially since Bernie then dropped out of the 2020 race. Again, the primaries rigged against Bernie because what happened in 2020, there were 56 candidates as far as I'm aware. It was at least 56. And I had to count them at one point. It was insane how many there were. But once they actually got to the debate stage, there was like 15 of them. And Kamala Harris, I believe, was the first one who made it to that first debate. She was the first one to drop out, and she dropped out before the primaries. And that left a lot of people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Burbishaw, something like that. I can't remember his name. And then a few others, and then Joe Biden. And then, so Joe Biden was considered the moderate Democrat, and he was, he had a bunch of people who basically would steal votes from him in the primaries, and that would give Bernie enough of an edge to win the early primaries, and then he would have the momentum to go on to win the rest of the race. So what the Democrats did is they basically paid off like Pete Buttigieg and Burbishaw, I think that's his name, and a few others to drop out because they were stealing votes from Joe Biden because they're also moderate Democrats. And then they basically kept Elizabeth Warren in the race, even though Elizabeth Warren had no chance in hell to ever win. She lied about her race. She said she was African American. I mean, she said that she was Native American. It turns out she's like 164th, like, Native American. I mean, yeah, they had a Native American in their family tree back like 5 or 6 generations, something like that. It's amazing they could trace it back that far, but, I mean, she lied to get a scholarship. She was super progressive. She's not good to look at. I mean, let's face it, looks are important to a president. You have to have at least some decorum and some, like, you know, personality and aesthetics to you. You can't just be the ugliest person that ever fall out of the ugly tree. And she looked old, very old back then. And she doesn't do a lot to fix it. And that's probably also another reason why, like, Bernie Sanders probably never would have won either, because he just looks fat, old, and ugly. It's sad that people vote that way, but I mean, it is what it is, man. But she stayed in the race even though she had no chance of winning. And a lot of people speculate it's because they had everyone else drop out, but they kept her in because she would steal votes from Bernie Sanders. And indeed, it ended up that Joe Biden suddenly jumped up into the polls. He lost like the first few primary races, and then he suddenly won. So they rigged 2016, and they rigged 2020, and then they rigged 2024. Now, granted, when Trump was running in 2020, there was not any serious competition. He was seen as a good president by the Republican Party. A lot of people supported him. And the people who ran against him were 2 no-names. Thought I dropped out there for a second. Were 2 no-names. 3 no-names, I think. There might have been a 4th no-name. Who just had TDS and no one really cared about. And there were a few primaries that were basically came up that said, like, hey, this is only going to be one person on this ballot. He's the only one who, like, qualifies. It's the one thing, slightly, I don't care slightly that Joe Biden was the only one on the Florida ballot because Trump did the same thing. But when I did make a tweet on it one point, and I basically pointed out in that tweet is that Trump was the only one on the ballot in like 10 to 14 states or something like that. And I think Joe Biden was like the only real competitor on like all of those, like on more states than that. And Trump was doing way better in the Republican primaries in 2020 than Joe Biden was doing in 2024. But like Dean Phillips, he won 4 delegates, and then Jason Palmer won 3. And I believe it was the U.S. Virgin Islands that Jason Palmer won. I actually went onto his page and I was like, hey, why don't you run for the convention? I mean, what do you have to lose? You are the only one who cares about or oversees territories, which is interesting to me. He got 91 votes. I mean, there were 91 votes in that race, and he beat Joe Biden, and he won in the territory because he was the only one who actually like talked to them. He was the only one. I mean, in the Democrat primaries, obviously Trump won all the territories. But he was the only one in the Democrat primaries in 2024 that actually bothered to go talk to people in the territories and ask them like what they wanted. And I thought that was actually a good sign of leadership. I wouldn't vote for Jason Palmer. And me telling him to do that is kind of like just a, like, hey, why don't you go like cause some trouble for them? And it's like, on one hand, kind of like a skeevy thing for me to do. Try to get like Democrats to go mess up the process, but at the same time, I'm really mad at Democrats. I'm like really mad at them that we told them the entire time, hey, Joe Biden, yeah, he's not all there. Maybe for the sake of your party and for the country, you should actually run somebody who would be, capable of running the country. I mean, even if it's somebody I really don't like and I really don't want in as the presidency, I'd rather have somebody I don't like in than somebody who is so completely incompetent that it actually endangers my life and the lives of my family and friends. I mean, let's just face it. I don't want to end up having to fight in a war that I don't have to fight in. Now, granted, again, U.S. Military Reserve. That's my boss on the weekends, quote unquote. I'm a weekend warrior. None of my views reflect the DoD, Department of the Navy, the Marine Corps, or anyone else in the military. They're all my own. He did not get us, me personally, and the other reservists, into a war yet. I mean, people died under his command, but people die under, and I'm upset about that. Don't get me wrong, I'm upset about that. But we did put a risk by joining, and people do die under presidents. It's going to happen. And I'm pretty sure if you looked hard enough, you would find that American soldiers died under Trump. Could you blame it on Trump directly? There would be some arguments. But I'm just saying, Joe Biden hasn't yet got us into a position in which the reserve or have to be activated or the active duty personnel have to go in to start a new war. The United States personally is not involved in war. You can blame stuff on Joe, and there's still plenty of time, but I mean, you can't make that argument specifically against Joe Biden. Again, all my opinions, and it feels weird to defend Joe Biden like that, but I mean, again, technically, my boss on the weekends. I just think that I'd rather have Donald Trump, personally, because I'm on social media right now, I gotta be careful what I say, and since I mentioned I'm also military, personally, I'd rather have Donald Trump, and Joe Biden's dropping out anyways, than I'd rather not have Kamala Harris. Anyways, back to the Democrats. If they do not pick Kamala Harris, the first quote-unquote black president, they're going to have a huge problem in the convention. Who is going to be the presidential nominee? Because if it's not Kamala Harris, I said 11 to 12 million people are probably mostly okay with that of the voters. Maybe all 14 million are okay with Kamala Harris taking over. I don't know. But, I mean, there's got to be a bunch of people who feel disenfranchised, who are upset that they didn't get a Dean Phillips or Jason Palmer or, literally any of the dozen other people who were technically in this race who never got, any screen time. I mean, Cenk Uygur joined, and again, I mentioned this before one time, he might technically be allowed to be president because even though he was born in Turkey, both of his parents were American citizens, so technically he would be considered an American even though he wasn't born on embassy land. That's a real gray area in the Constitution, but the kind of consensus was he wouldn't have been. But I mean, even Cenk Uygur, extreme progressive that he is probably better than a guy who's suffering from dementia. Again, personal opinion. But LBJ and Ronald Reagan both had dementia, and both of their administrations, was it LBJ? Can't remember. But both of their administrations basically went to pot near the end because they were having a lot of issues with their heads. And it's just for the safety of the country, I can say that, hey, my boss, he's sick. That's fine for me to say. He's sick. He probably shouldn't be my boss right now. He probably should take off some days or, allow a different boss to be appointed. But if Kamala Harris doesn't get in, who are they going to pick? Andy Beshear? Ray Cooper? Gretchen Whitmer? For God's sakes, for the love of God, no, please. She's my governor. I really would not ever want her to be president. She almost got sued by the entire country of Canada because she unilaterally shut down the gas pipeline to their major airport. Which, by the way, it didn't just fuel their airport. It also was their natural gas and their gasoline pipeline. So if she shut down their jet fuel, gasoline, and natural gas unilaterally without consulting them, she was almost got Michigan sued by the entire country of Canada. That's how much that's how bad she is at foreign diplomacy. And I mean, she's not even allowed to be a foreign diplomat as a governor. Then they would have Gavin Newsom, and then they would have Mark Kelly, the senator of Arizona, who ran against, is that Blake Masters or was that Kerry Lake at the time? Or was that a different race? Can't remember off the top of my head. Anyways, there are a few choices you could pick, but the only real person she would be able to pick would be a white man. No one would vote. There are still a lot of racist and sexist in the Democrat Party. I mean, they were the party of Jim Crow, slavery, the party of segregation, the KKK. There's still a lot of white people inside the Democrat Party who just do not like black people. This is actually why Michelle Obama has basically promised for the last decade that she is never going to run ever. Because it was very clear that she hated the people in Washington, D.C., and they hated her. And she considered a lot of them racist. People in the Democrat Party are not going to be happy about voting for a black woman, so they would like to have somebody who is white on the ticket. And it's sad, again, that racism like that still exists in America. But, I mean, that's just the Democrats. It's terrible. But a lot of them just don't like black people or Indians. And there are people on the right who will not vote for someone who is not a Christian. They have to at least be a Christian. I mean, I forget what her name is. Ann Coulter, I think, said that she wouldn't vote for Ramaswamy because he's a first-generation American who is not Christian. There's arguments for that. Like, you would want a long family line of people who are very well involved inside American politics who don't carry on traditions from their old country, that they want American traditions to stay first and foremost inside of America. And this is basically like the argument that's going on inside the UK with the Prime Minister of every single UK government being a non-white person. I mean, it's a little bit odd. So I can see where she's coming from, but I don't agree. I think Ramaswamy would be a great president, even though he's not Christian and he's not white. But it is a hang-up for some people. And no one is going to want to vote for Gretchen Whitmer once they figure out what her record is. No one wants to know about Gavin Newsom because as much as the people in California supposedly liked the guy, they already tried to recall him once already. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work. He is not the guy, and he's got too many controversies. It was, in my opinion, it's not going to be Mark Kelly because he's a first-term senator who just got in 2020. It's not going to be Gretchen Whitmer because no one wants... A lot of people on the Democrat side are also not going to want to vote for 2 women on the ticket. They're going to want at least 1 man on it. That's too far for the Democrats. I have this distinct feeling. There's a lot of people who are also sexist in the Democrat Party. And they try to hide it, but it's very clear. It's not going to... I said not going to be Gavin Newsom. It's not going to be Gretchen Whitmer. It's not going to be Mark Kelly. It would have to be Ray Cooper, governor of North Carolina, to try to flip that state because it's already a swing state. But more than likely, even if he ran, even if he got the presidential nomination, I don't think that North Carolina is going to vote against Trump. It's just not a thing that's happening. So the most logical solution would then be to pick someone from the Rust Belt. And Illinois is not technically from the Rust Belt, but it's nearby. But that's going to go for Democrats no matter what. And the governor of that is Ray Cooper, I believe. So the only one that makes sense would be the governor of Pennsylvania, who's already on his 2nd term, who would already technically be on his way out, who technically might not even have to drop out of his position as governor when he runs, because technically he would only have to make a few speeches here or there, be in a few ads, and then do the vice presidential debate. So he could stay in as governor, and that would be Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, which is one of the biggest Rust Belt state with the most electoral votes. It's a close race. People in Wisconsin and Michigan don't know as many of his gas or weird policies like they know about Gretchen Whitmer. So they might get some sway with that. That would be their legitimate best choice in my opinion. But it's just, I can't imagine somebody wanting to throw away their whole career, because there's no way that Kamala Harris can beat Trump. I mean, there are a lot of people who are coping online, but Reddit, the mainstream media, Twitter, they're not reality, man. A lot of people do not like these people. They do not like Kamala Harris. She's been a terrible vice president. She's been terrible for the country. She can't speak. I mean, she's sometimes worse than Joe Biden in just she sounds infantile a lot. It's just bizarre. I mean, I think the Democrat Party is just screwed. I think all of this is just a distraction now so that they can try to win the House and the Senate, but I don't think they're going to win those either. If you go out and vote, you have to go out and vote. I wouldn't normally say vote straight party line down the ticket, because I have voted for Democrats in the past. I mean, some of them in uncontested races, mind you, but I don't think every Democrat is completely and utterly corrupt and hates America. That's not a thing. There are some of them that are good at their jobs. Like the sheriff of Detroit or of Wayne County, I think is relatively decent. And I mean, it is what it is, man. But yeah, I think the Democrats are just, they're done. I just keep getting this image in my mind of like all these people setting up Kamala Harris, like building her up as much as possible, and then like shoving her in front of Trump with like knightly armor or something and a shield, and then he's like 1,000 feet tall and he just stomps on her and walks away. Like, it's over. But you have to go out and vote for that. It's just, oh my god. It's like putting a small child in front of a charging bull at this point. It's like, it's just not, it's not going to go good for her. They're trying to make it sound as reasonable as possible, but no, it's not. Anyways, I think that's it for now, guys. I rambled long enough. That's it for now. Bye.